Honourable Member St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first, Mr. Speaker, since this is my first time that I have spoken since this parliamentary sitting, I want to beg your indulgence to congratulate you once again on your assumption of this very important office of Speaker of this House of Parliament. Everyone in this country knows, Mr. Speaker, that you have fine intellect, that you're fearless, you're fair, and you're passionate, that you know the rules of the law, and you'll play by the rules of the law, and we appreciate that you will appreciate the cut and thrust of the parliamentary debate from time to time, being such a great advocate in the courts over the years. So I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to having you guide these deliberations with this House and to learn from you and lean on your experience with the same brilliance and exuberance that you normally apply defending your clients in the courts of laws in Antigua and Barbuda and successfully prosecuting their interests. I would also crave your indulgence, sir, to take this opportunity to congratulate my former opponent, the honourable member for St. John's, for All Saints East and St. Luke, for being elevated to this august House, the Honourable Joanne Messiah, and I would like to welcome her and congratulate her, sir. Now to the bill, sir. Mr. Speaker, the amendments which we are considering today to the CIP legislation, which was adopted exactly 1 year and 5 months ago under the UPP regime, are intended to improve upon what they have done, to make sure that we have a better and more regulated piece of legislation that could stand the scrutiny of the international community, the United States, the Canadian, and the United Kingdom governments. That we have a model legislation and a model jurisdiction to attract high net worth individuals to come to our shores. The philosophical debate, Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, on the granting of citizenship to high net worth men and women and their children has already taken place. It took place last year. It took place when the bill was first piloted in 2012. But I have a little more to add, Mr. Speaker. This new administration, elected a mere 66 days ago, sir, recognizes that the CIP program is a very important and integral part of our advancement and our economy. It is an important piece of machinery and a device that will move forward the economic recovery that this country needs. Its primary purpose, sir, is to attract, as I said, high net worth individuals to our shores. They in turn will provide the Treasury and our people with much needed millions of dollars to run this country, to develop it, to create jobs for our people, to earn much millions of dollars of foreign exchange annually that will be able to create thousands of jobs and build thousands of homes, as announced by our Honourable Prime Minister Gaston Brown. It will also be used, sir, to pay down the national debt, that astronomical national debt that we inherited on June the 12th, 2014. So there are a lot of areas that the funds can be used to develop the country, expand the economy, bring new investment, create jobs. But I bring your attention, sir, and I crave your indulgence, to July the 1st, 2014 press release, because much has been said by the Honourable Member of St. Philip South, the Honourable Wilmot Daniel, about St. Kitts. A press release from the IMF, sir, concerning a similar program operated by St. Kitts and Nevis, which is a major competitor. We must realize they are our major competitor for foreign direct investment, for tourists, and for high net worth individuals. The press release is available on the IMF website, sir. But I have made copies today to distribute to all the members. And it says, and the St. Kitts and Nevis repays early sums outstanding obligations to the IMF. I have it here. 1 minute. The press release, number 14, 313, July the 1st, 2014, and I will give it to the Clerk of Parliament to circulate to honourable members, sir. And if I crave your indulgence that I may read from it, it says, St. Kitts and Nevis repaid ahead of schedule, SDR, 11.1 million, about US $17.1 million obligations to the IMF on June the 24th, 2014. The early repayment is about 1/4, 23.4% of the SDR 47.4 million, about US $73.1 million that St. Kitts and Nevis borrowed from the IMF on the standby arrangement. St. Kitts and Nevis borrowed less than the total amount approved under the 3-year arrangement, equivalent to SDR 52.5 million, about US $84 million, as the authorities began to treat the arrangement as precautionary in March 2014 during the combined 7th and 8th review. The amounts repaid earlier, obligations falling during 2014 and 2015 under the original repayment schedule. The IMF had this to say, sir. The authorities are to be commended for their economic achievements under the program. There has been a significant improvement in fiscal and debt sustainability and strong economic recovery. St. Kitts and Nevis' ability to repay the IMF ahead of schedule reflects the improvement in its macroeconomic balances that reflect both policy efforts and, listen to this, sir, Mr. Speaker, the strong inflows under the Citizenship Investment Program. So they were able to repay ahead of time by the strong inflows, that is the cash generated by the Citizenship Investment Program. They go on to say this is the first time that a payment of this magnitude has been repaid to the fund by a Caribbean nation. And that was achieved, sir, by the Citizenship Investment Program. While Antigua and Barbuda, and we have learned today, have failed to pay the IMF under the former government on June the 6th, 2014, begs for more time to repay its IMF obligations, St. Kitts and Nevis is paying ahead of time. And sir, that is a lesson which is not lost on us. But Mr. Speaker, I've said that the philosophical debate on the CIP should be over by now. And it's at the end. Nevertheless, I want to go back a little bit in history. And I crave your indulgence, sir. In 1952, and a very important piece of legislation was passed and adopted back then by this Parliament, by our national hero, the late Vere Cornwall Bird Sr. Reference was made to the August 18th, 1952 law, exactly 62 years ago, sir, by the new Governor General in his throne speech last Friday. And that legislation was called, sir, the Hotel Aid Ordinance Act. One writer has noted the conditions for tourism were ripe in 1952 in Antigua and the world beyond. Wealthy North Americans and Western Europeans began to redefine work and leisure after the Second World War in 1939 to 1945. And on August the 18th, 1952, sir, the Hotels Aid Ordinance Act was passed into law in this August House, 10 days following its adoption in the Legislative Assembly of Parliament. And that piece of legislation transformed this entire country, the entire economy, by V.C. Bird. Tourism has redefined this nation. It has turned us from a barefoot and barely literate people into being a prosperous little paradise nation in the Caribbean Sea, Mr. Speaker, a nation that ranks 29th out of 179 nations on the UN Human Development Index by 1994. And I go further. When Vere Cornwall Bird Sr., our national hero, told his colleagues that Antigua and Barbuda was aiming to develop tourism, they scoffed at the idea. The late Sir Eric Williams said, what little Antigua want to do with tourism? What are they going to do? Go and graze cattle? And in fact, under the 1958 West Indies Federation, the allocation of the industry's plan by the then Federation allocated Antigua and assigned us to raising livestock because of the absence of the hoof and mouth disease. And Vere Bird protested vehemently. He said, no way. They want to turn Antigua into a paddock. Not under me. He lamented. He wanted tourism. He wanted to move from a sugar-based, cotton-based agriculture industry into tourism and services. He had vision. He had foresight, Mr. Speaker. And I remember, I was not born, but I've been told and read that when he sold the Half Moon Bay lands up there, he sold them for $1 a square foot. When he negotiated the Dickinson Bay lands, $1 a square foot. Because his philosophy was always, you can build the buildings and the hotels. The white man can come and build everything he wants to build. He'll create jobs for our people, stimulate our economy, and he can't take them up and go with it. If they go bankrupt, another company or firm will have to buy them. And so I cite these circumstances in our history because many of us think that the future is completely unknowable. If we examine our own history, Mr. Speaker, the future is discernible from events in the past. And Antigua and Barbuda is about to take off. As our Prime Minister said, we want to transform this country, this little small country, into an economic tiger of the Caribbean, an economic powerhouse of the world, where we can even be competitive to places like Singapore. We just recently had the benefit to come back from Sardinia. And Sardinia 30, 40 years ago had nothing but scrubland before the Albert Khan bought it and then sold it to the Qatar family. And now they developed multi-million-dollar homes all on the coastline. They don't have no white, beautiful, sandy beaches like us. And in the summer you have all these multi-billionaire yachts coming and docking. I mean, the biggest billionaires of the world. I've never seen so much multi-billion-dollar yachts in one place at any one time. And that is Sardinia. I remember the former Prime Minister, remember for St. John's Wood, he used to always telling us, you must go, travel, open your eyes. And when the Prime Minister, the Honorable Gaston Browne, went and he came back, within 4 days of his arriving back onto the country, he called up the land survey people, 2 of our land surveyors, an architect, and he chartered a boat Saturday and went right around the island from 10 o'clock in the morning. And he says, I want to create some economic zones in this country where I can create a little Sardinia. And I must compliment him. He wastes no time at the wheel. The wheel is spinning and the wagon is rolling. And we are about to take off. So, back to the CIP. We ought to have had a turtle and a deer as our national heroes and our national symbols. Why? Because the deer is swift and the turtle knows that in order to move forward, it must stick its head out. So I want you to understand that Antigua and Barbuda, the land of the leather-backed turtle, knows that we are moving forward under this new CIP. Speedily to greater developments by taking measured risks. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, we must understand that when citizenship is conferred upon someone, there must be a benefit bestowed upon the country. And as the Prime Minister says, we must serve the interests of the country, not narrow, partisan, or private interests. What is in the best interest? We have a number of hoteliers who have come to me as the Minister of Tourism since I've been named in that ministry, and they want us to take the cabinet to include all of the existing plans without doing any new expansion, without adding new rooms. We can't have that, Mr. Speaker. It creates no new wealth. We need new rooms. We need to move Antigua from 3,200 rooms to 6,000 rooms. So we have the critical mass, so then we can attract the airlines to come. How are we going to achieve that? By putting in all of our hotel rooms, the existing, some of them are dilapidated like Rex Halcyon, that they refuse the owners to put any money into it and to revamp it. And then they want to come to the government and say, we want to go under the umbrella of the CIP. Prime Minister says, no, absolutely not. I will not even entertain it. It must be new development. New development creates new villas, creates new jobs, new property taxes, new utility bills for APUA, new work for our people, creates new wealth for the country. The CIP program achieves this significant objective. It is not pie in the sky. In the New York City Harbor, the Statue of Liberty says, Give us your poor. Give us your downtrodden. Well, today in Antigua and Barbuda, we say, give us your wealth. Give us your well-endowed. You're very intelligent. Your contacts. Bring it to Antigua. For we want to build a first-class nation, not of scoundrels, not of people of shady characters. And when you speak of due diligence, you're wrong, Mr. Member for St. Philip South. Our previous government left in place a very, very rigorous due diligence system. Because I remember back in 2012 when we first debated this act, I was the first to get up here and to insist when the UPP government wanted to give one company, I won't call their name, the right to do due diligence. And that company was the largest service provider, bringing in all of the investors into the country, and they're well connected, they're a very reputable firm, but they wanted to do due diligence. And I said, no, you can't do that. You've got to go out there and hire reputable US, Canadian, Chinese, whatever it is, and you hired, I think, 5 or 6 different ones. As the Prime Minister says, 7,500 US. Rigorous due diligence is done before any application is sent to the Prime Minister to sign or to the Cabinet. And by the way, you speak about the Cabinet. The Prime Minister have never signed any application for a passport without preparing a circulation note and carrying it to the Cabinet. Full transparency. But we will enshrine it in the Act. The PM have agreed. It will be in that. Because you know minister means Minister of Cabinet. And very transparent. But he very well knows in most of the acts and joint development, DBA, APU minister means minister sitting in Cabinet. But so full transparency will enshrine it. So we want to say to them, to those wealthy people, we want to build a first-class nation. We want to bring our people, man, from the dregs of colonialism and exploitation to benefit. As the Prime Minister said, this system, Mr. Speaker, must benefit our people. Yes, our passports are sacrosanct. Yes, there's a lot of talk and emotion of our people about selling their passports. And rightfully so. Passports are very emotionally attached to our people. But at the same time, we have to look at the bigger plan, the bigger vision, how we can build a small, vulnerable economy, that we are just based on tourism. We need to find other services, other creative ways. And the Gaston Brown administration will make this law better. And that's what we are seeking to do today, to tidy it up, to put a board in place. We are going to improve on the weak-kneed effort of a previous administration who did not put a lot of thought into it. Why would you want to have 50, 100 applications going directly to a minister every month? You must have a board. The minister sets general policy and gives the general policy to the board, and the board executes and makes sure that the CEO and the staff is executing their job properly, and then recommends after the due diligence is done to the minister, and the minister takes the applications to cabinet, and then he signs the passport. As he said, nobody else but the Prime Minister will be authorized to sign those passports. And the American government have made it lucidly clear that they want to make sure that the Prime Minister is the person that's the substantive minister. So all of this nonsense with the Prime Minister is raising, oh, why delegate to another minister? Why delegate? Suppose the Prime Minister is out of the country and he has 60 applications. That's one of the biggest complaints in St. Kitts. That there's nobody in the law, not even his deputy Prime Minister or his acting Prime Minister can sign. So the law now gives the flexibility that he can say the Minister of Investment or the acting Prime Minister, the deputy, whatever it is, or another minister can sign these things. So he's in China for 10 days. And we have 60 applications sitting on his desk. We're going to hold them up. And the Treasury needs revenue. So that is the purpose of putting it in. It's not no cynical thing. I wish the former Prime Minister was here. So we are about solving problems, overcoming challenges, and making our country shine again. And that was the mandate given to the Gaston Brown administration on June 12th. And sir, failure is not an option. Mr. Speaker, under the existing law, the Cabinet of Antigua and Barbuda is the approving body. Under the amendments, a board is now created that sets broad policy guidelines. They're not going to micromanage the everyday running of the unit. They set the broad broad policy guidelines handed down by the minister, leaving the executive merely to say yea or nay. Given the speed with which a CIP unit must move, because that is very important. You have a lot of these wealthy investors, they don't want to have their passports sitting there for 4 and 5 and 6 months. They want to be able, once their due diligence is done and they are cleared, they want to be able to have a fast turnaround. And I'm going to suggest to the Honorable Prime Minister that the CIP unit even buys their own passport machine, so that you can have, it's still in the Prime Minister's ministry. Yes, so you have a second machine. What's wrong with that? For the speed of it, it's the same passport in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What is wrong with that? Why? Why? To speed up the process. In St. Kitts, one of the largest complaints against St. Kitts, sir, is that it takes 3 to 4 months turnaround time. And you know what they have to do, some investors? Some investors, they're built into the regulations, have to pay a special expedition fee of 50 or 75,000 US to get their passport expedited in a week or two after they do the Not the print your own passport. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will have the second machine there, but just designated to do those CIP passports. What's wrong with that? Of course there's so many we're going to do. We are going to have 50 a month. Oh, well, you were totally opposed to it in the Senate. I want to hear what you say today. I really want to hear you today, because in the Senate you were opposed to it. You were not one of the senators that were fired, though. But I say that I fully support the change with the amendments to bring, and I want to bring to your attention, Mr. Speaker, page 5 of the draft bill before us, the establishment of the Citizenship by Investment Board. And just to reiterate, section 2A, where it says, there's established a board to be known as the Citizenship by Investment Board, having the powers and duties conferred or imposed upon it by this Act and any other statutory provision. The board established under subsection 1 is a body corporate with perpetual succession, common sealants capable of suing and being sued in its corporate name. Subject to the provisions of this Act, the board shall have the power to enter into contracts and shall be able to employ persons, subject to the approval of the minister. Excuse me. I also want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that I'm convinced that this citizenship investment program, it doesn't have to be infinite. It can be after we have raised enough monies, after 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, we can review it. By then, I'm sure the Gaston Brown administration will have rebuilt this country and its economy. And the amount of investors that are coming in every single week to develop projects. And this is not pie-in-the-sky investors. We have to be choosing between investors now who want to do Half Moon Bay, which ones want to do Morris Bay. You have 3-4 that want to take over Halcyon, to buy Royal Antigua, to build a second hotel at Royal Antigua. Every single week, you have investors flying into this country, signing a memorandum of understandings, meeting with the Prime Minister in different ministries, and wanting to invest tangibly into this economy. So this CIP program, although it's great for the economy, it has to be something that we keep on the books for the next 20 years. After we've revived the economy, after we've brought in enough money, we can review it. We can review it after 5, 7 years, whatever the time is, whatever the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and the country thinks. So it does not have to be ad infinitum. But in arriving at our decision on this particular legislation, Mr. Speaker, we are conscious over on this side of the House that neither time nor history is static. In the tides of fortune and in the interests of a nation, you must have some kind of creativity, some kind of change. It would be a moribund ship of state that tied itself to an unmovable anchor, Mr. Speaker, even as the turbulent waters that we inherited around it before June the 12th threatened to overturn the ship of state. So what we're going to do? Sit down and do absolutely nothing and don't be creative? Our ship of state was tossing and turning in very, very turbulent waters. And the risks of it capsizing was extremely great. But the Prime Minister doesn't want to get into detail. He says the reasons that our ship of state has been buffered forward, we can't, let investors feel that we have an economy that are on the brink of bankruptcy. We want to restore confidence in our economy. So there are a lot of benefits for the CIP unit. I know the time does not allow me to go in, and today we are not going to deal with the amendments. Am I correct? We're only dealing with the board and the principal legislation. We'll bring back by resolution. Today, we'll deal with the amendments this afternoon. Okay. Well, with those few words, I would like to commend the bill, congratulate the Prime Minister for bringing it in, and it has my full support. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member of St. Peter.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, sir, I move that this Honourable House be adjourned until 2:30 for lunch. Sir?
Yeah, we're having lunch here.
We'll be having lunch here, it's not 2 o'clock.
Half an hour. New dispensation.
Lunch is being provided here in the chambers.